House Republicans have officially released their blueprint for the federal budget, which does call for cutting trillions of dollars in taxes and also increasing funding for certain government programs. Medicare, though, might be on the chopping block. So let's get to the details. Let's see what we have learned based on this blueprint. So look, honestly, based on what I've read so far, it's one of the most outlandish budget bills I've ever seen in terms of skewing our economy, rigging our economy in favor of the richest people while hurting the poorest people. So let's get to why I think that is. House Republicans released a budget resolution Wednesday that calls for cutting taxes by up to $4.5 trillion and sets a goal of slashing federal spending by $2 trillion. The resolution also would raise the debt limit by $4 trillion. Okay, so far those are just numbers. What does that even mean? Okay, you're gonna cut taxes. That could be good. You're gonna cut some spending. That might not be so bad, but what are they gonna cut? Well, the House Budget Committee is scheduled to review and consider their proposal tomorrow. The House Budget Resolution adds that the goal of the concurrent resolution is to reduce mandatory spending by $2 trillion, referring to the part of the US budget that includes Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP benefits, otherwise known as food stamps, and more. That's where the cuts are gonna come from. And remember, Donald Trump not only wants to extend the soon to expire 2017 tax cuts, he wants to increase the tax cuts for corporations. So right now, the current corporate tax rate is 21%. In 2017, Trump took it from 35% to 21%. His new goal is to lower the corporate tax rate to 15%. Which obviously robs our federal government of necessary revenue. And by the way, don't think that corporations are actually gonna pay 15% in federal taxes because he's not getting rid of the corporate tax loopholes and all the various deductions that corporations are able to take when they file their taxes. So effectively, they will pay nothing in federal taxes with those deductions in place. So look, at the center of the budget and policy priorities, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities notes that these cuts will be catastrophic for millions of Americans. They estimate that 36 million people or more could be at risk of losing their healthcare coverage through the expanded Medicare program that was initiated as part of the Affordable Care Act. The federal government is looking to cut that, or at least House Republicans are. 40 million people could receive less help from SNAP to buy groceries, and that's problematic to say the least, especially at a time when inflation is still very much an issue. And millions of them could potentially lose their food assistance altogether. And if the House fails to find $2 trillion in deficit reduction, the resolution says the Ways and Means Committee's mandate of $4.5 trillion should be reduced by a commensurate amount to offset the difference. Now, keep in mind that House GOP members are looking to slash the social safety net in order to pay for the tax cuts that will benefit some working class people. I'm not discounting that, but will overwhelmingly benefit the wealthy more, especially corporations. And believe it or not, some House Republicans aren't even satisfied with the cuts that are being proposed to social safety net programs. Tubby little weirdo Chip Roy is one of them. He's in the House Freedom Caucus. Roy, who serves on the Budget Committee, said he had been clear since December that I think we need to get to $2.5 trillion in cuts. He wants to cut more. And Representative Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, who's also in the House Freedom Caucus, says that he's not in favor of what he's seeing so far. He also wants to see deeper cuts to government programs that help disadvantaged people, marginalized people, people who need economic support. I am so sick of seeing taxpayer money go to all sorts of garbage, including, funding military nonsense in other countries and whatever war the US has decided to engage in. But when it comes to helping our people, because sometimes people are in need. Okay, you never know what could happen. You could lose a job, you could get laid off, you have a family you need to feed. I want my tax dollars to go to Americans to help them. Okay, that's what we should be focusing on. But instead, that's the first thing that Republicans are looking to cut, at least in the House for now. John, what are your thoughts?
I think that this is no time for libs to be complaining about Donald Trump's agenda. The voters were very clear that they were having far too easy a time paying for food and paying for healthcare, and they wanted it to be made more difficult. And so he is making good on those promises in all of these different ways. No, this is exactly what we knew he would do. The main domestic legislative priority would be the tax cuts. There's a lot of other stuff, window dressing stuff to squirrel the masses, transgender stuff and DEI stuff and all of that. Trump doesn't really care about any of that. He cares about the tax cuts because it's massive amounts of money. They estimate $5 to $11 trillion over a decade. So, I mean, what's that? 3 to 4 Green New Deals. And so what the Trump presidency will be if they get this, and they'll almost certainly get it because what Republican would vote against it, and the Democrats have no way to stop it, is an absolutely massive historic redistribution of wealth from Trump's own voters to the wealthiest people in the country. And they'll get, a $70, $200 tax cut or whatever, which will chip away a little bit at the various ways that everything they buy will be made more expensive through the tariffs and all that, through his immigration policies, making food and housing more expensive, and then potentially losing all these benefits. Losing the food stamps, losing Medicare, losing Medicaid, potentially having to work a few more years before you're finally allowed by the government to retire. And so overall, for the vast majority, 95% of us, life is gonna be more difficult, but in return, those who've had it the easiest will have it slightly easier. So I guess we have that to look forward to.
So we'll see what Trump has to say about potential cuts to things like Medicare, which he swore up and down he wouldn't touch. And he swore up and down that he wouldn't touch it because he knew how politically unpopular it would be. But, he really wants those tax cuts, so we'll see what happens. But let's talk about the one area in which Republicans want to increase spending. So on immigration and border security funding, a top Trump priority, the resolution grants the Judiciary Committee, which oversees immigration policy, $110 billion. The Senate budget actually appropriated more. They wanted to provide $175 billion for immigration enforcement. In fact, when Senator Lindsey Graham saw the blueprint for what House Republicans are proposing, he was unhappy with the amount that was allocated for immigration and demanded that they follow through on what Trump is asking for when it comes to immigration enforcement, which is the $175 billion. So look, if the mass deportations really do get carried out the way that Trump claims they will, there will be a labor shortage in the country. And if you're an American worker noticing a labor shortage at your place of work, you better start negotiating for higher wages. I'm serious. You should take advantage of that opportunity to negotiate higher wages and have all of these corporations that have benefited from these massive tax cuts pony the F up and pay you a higher wage, a living wage. I don't know. Like, House Republicans have always been the same. They've never changed. They've never even pretended to be different, John. Like, they've always been neocons. They've always loved neoliberal economic policies. There was never any reason to believe that House Republicans had changed. Sure, when they're around Trump, they'll pay lip service to what Trump wants to do, but they love war, they love military spending, they love targeting social safety net programs that we have paid into for cuts. And these are all deeply unpopular policies. And so where are the Democrats? Like, this is the kind of stuff that they need to be calling Republicans out on. But they don't. Like, that's the thing that drives me crazy. If you know Medicare is the third rail in politics, then draw attention to the fact that they're looking to cut Medicare.
Yeah, it's got like, I don't know, a 90% approval rating from among the people that use it. It's the
Yep.
most popular thing the government has ever done. But they need to kill it because the rich don't rely on it in the same way as poor and working class people. So get rid of it. My bank account needs to have more zeros. I'll never touch that money. I could never work through it if I lived 100 lifetimes. But I need that number to look a little bit bigger, even if tens of millions of people have to suffer and potentially die as a result of it. And then along the way, the massive, I mean, you pointed out the amount that they're gonna spend on a recurring basis on this immigration thing and the building of the camps. And I mean, I'm not an expert on like, nation building, but I would have to assume that rebuilding Gaza once we steal it from the Palestinians would cost literally trillions of dollars.
Yep.
It'll make Iraq look like nothing. You're literally building Manhattan from the ground up. And again, is any of that what the American people voted for? I'm pretty sure they said they wanted less nation building. I'm pretty sure they thought, and I tried to get through to them for literally years, that Trump was anti-intervention. And I tried very hard to get through. And instead, we're gonna do something that's gonna make Iraq and Afghanistan look like nothing.
Yeah, look, Trump doesn't have an ideology, right? Trump does what's right for Trump at any given moment. But, I thought that he would maybe listen to his base. I mean, he did in his first term to some extent. And his base doesn't want to engage in any kind of war in the Middle East. They're not interested in the Gaza thing. Of course, there's a faction of Republican voters who are still neoconservatives and absolutely love the idea of the US nation building and engaging in wars in the Middle East. But the MAGA crowd, the America First crowd, they're real and they don't want this. It's just that Trump doesn't really care what they want. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, he has reiterated repeatedly that he's gonna take Gaza, whether MAGA likes it or not. So America first, not so much. Maybe America second, maybe.
If there's time.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.